for 3rd through 6th grade in the old portables. The wooden ones that had the big oil heater in the back over the hole that the spiders came up through. We did not have a library. I was a reader. There was no library in the little portables, but once the elementary school was built, we had a little tiny library. And when I got to high school, well, that one wasn't very big either. I waited for a library. By the time I had graduated from high school, I had learned how to take the bus downtown to the main libraries so I could get books. I'd read everything that I wanted to read in the other 2 libraries. By that time, it was the YA section for me, which is very different than it is now. Lots and lots of classics, and I loved every one of them. Well, I went off to graduate school. I was the proud bearer of a bachelor's degree in history. Well, yeah, right up until, you take that degree to McDonald's and say, please, Harry. So I went off to graduate school and found out I really hated its guts. I was learning more and more about less and less, and believe me, at that time of my life, that was not what I was about. I wanted to know more and more about more. So I left. And there I was, stuck with my history degree and my non-master's degree, and library school seemed like a good idea. Turned out it was the best thing I ever did in my life. It was one of the... I didn't really know what I was going to do because I hadn't had any close-by libraries to really model my idea of what you do in a library, except, open books. Books. Because as you know, all librarians do is sit around and read. So, I went to library school, and this looked like, this part of librarianship looked good, that part looked good. It all looked kind of good. And then I took some children's librarian classes, and I thought, ooh, this kind of looks like fun. So my first job was in North Carolina. I was the outreach librarian. What I did was drive a van around to all these little teeny-weeny towns. We make stops at places like gas stations, church basements. Sometimes it was just on a neighbor's porch, someone who would let us sit there and read to the kids. I was very nervous about that. I never read to children before. I found out I liked it. And then, missing Miami, I came back home and got a job at the Miami-Dade Public Library System. Oh, and that's where I spent the rest of my working career. And at first they didn't really have a place for me because this was the decade of progress. They were opening libraries. They were hiring people to work in them. It was, who knew that was going to be the best it was going to get. So I did a little of this, did a little of that, and finally I got my own children's room. This is when children's librarians were still respected, I guess would be the word. And since then, it's become one of those fading in and out library trends that all librarians should be generalists. That means, and mark this well, it means that the children's librarian works on the reference desk. The reference librarian never does a preschool program. That's right. But I love this, and I knew a lot of my friends had gotten into librarianship, so they could go up the ladder and become, branch managers and things like that. I was not interested. I was having more fun than was legal being a children's librarian. And then when I finally got my own room, something happened. I wasn't just having fun anymore. I'm not going to mention the community, but the library had just built a branch branch to, the community had its own little teeny itsy library, but they were closing that so we could open this branch. Now, this community was kind of divided. There were quite wealthy people on one side and quite not wealthy people on the other side. There was a really neat little African-American neighborhood that was, you know, just really a nice little neighborhood. But it did have a bad project thing there for some reason. But even so, it was still a nice little neighborhood. Sometimes you'd get a chain snatcher, but nothing big. But what that neighborhood knew about the little branch that we had replaced was that it was racist. There was an older person who ran it. She was kind of scared of the black kids. Don't know why. Found out. They resented the hell out of that librarian. Who could blame them? Every time they went in, you know, somebody was standing at the door, staring at them, making sure they didn't do anything wrong. And when we opened the new one, there I was. And there was this one group of boys that would come in. Now, none of them were in middle school yet. And they were led by this really handsome kid that he had all the leadership qualities to make him the president or the head of the mafia. Could go either way. And he had little boys that followed around behind him like ducks and did everything he did because he was the man. Well, they used to make the rounds after school. They'd hit the convenience store, they'd hit the park, and then they'd come to the library with one mission: to get themselves kicked out of the library. It was a badge of honor, with everything they knew about the library being a racist place. It was their duty, and they'd done it. Well, I was going to change all that. I was going to be their wonderful librarian friend. Yeah, that worked. And then I was going to be the stern but completely fair librarian that they would know and love. Finally, I was kicking them out just as fast as anybody else would. They really knew how to push their buttons. But I had been getting more and more into storytelling. And a school nearby had gotten me in to tell Halloween stories to assemblies in the cafeteria. And since I love scary stories, I bopped right over and told them about the library and then, you know, the stories sweeten the medicine. I'm here to talk to you about the library. Boo! And tell you ghost stories. It's all worked. It all worked. And a couple of days later, I'm sitting at my desk, and in comes the president and his mob. And I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me, and the leader comes up and says, "You came to our school?" And I said, "Yeah, so," because by now I had the same attitude as he did. He completely manipulated. And he said, "You told those ghost stories." "Yeah, so?" "Tell us a ghost story." "Okay." So I sat them down in a corner and I told them stories, and then they came in the next day and I told them more stories, and then they came in the third day. I said, "I'm out of stories, you've heard them all." And we happened to be sitting at a table, and only the librarians will know this because it's etched in acid on our hearts. We were sitting by the 813s, which were the story collections. And, this was tough. When I told him I didn't have any more stories, the leader sort of looked at me a little bit, and his arm reached out, and he took a book of ghost stories, and he said, read to me. And I knew from that minute on that I was in the right job, that I'd never be in a better job, and that storytelling actually worked. We were never enemies again, we were never best friends. But I felt I had done something, even if it was just a little tiny thing, to make a change in his feeling about the library. And they still kept coming in, but they were never as bad as they were before. Ever, ever, ever. And we never kicked them out again. That alone was a victory. And that was what I considered the high point of my library career. I went on and I learned to be a storyteller for 13 years. I was a full-time storyteller for the library system. And this scenario, never quite as intensely and never quite as personally, repeated itself the whole 13 years I was in the schools telling stories for the library. My colleagues would tell me, oh, I know you were at the school today. I said, hi. Well, they came in asking for Wiley and Harry Man. I said, next time I'll give you a heads up. But that was a long time ago. I've since retired. I'm still a storyteller. But I don't know how else to tell you how important libraries are for children. I'm without words, or at least I was until a couple of days ago. For you who have not read this thing in the Herald, Girl Shot by Taliban opens library. Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani teenager who was shot in the head last year for advocating education for girls like herself, honored her own weapon of choice Tuesday, the book. The 16-year-old who was hospitalized in Britain after being shot by the Taliban was chosen to deliver the opening speech for a new public library in Birmingham, England. That's being touted as the largest in Europe. In a warmly received address outside the new 10-story building, whose more than 1 billion books include a collection of the first folios of Shakespeare's works, Malala declared that books are the only weapon that can defeat terrorism. And what I have to say to Mayor Jimenez is, what the hell? Thank you.